This is HighIntensityBusiness.com with Lawrence Neal, helping you achieve your health and fitness goals. Become a great personal trainer and build your high-intensity strength training business.
Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to HighIntensityBusiness.com. Today's guests are Luke Carlson and Mike Petrella, and today's topic is we're going to be talking about the coronavirus. You're probably sick of hearing about it, but we want to talk about it in the context of the personal training business industry, the high-intensity training industry. Luke is the founder and CEO of Discover Strength, a personal training business based in Minneapolis with 4 other personal training facilities in Minnesota. And my second guest is Mike Petrella. Mike is the owner and head trainer at STG Strength and Power. STG is regarded by many as one of the finest and best equipped private gyms in the world, and he is based in Ontario, Canada. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Lawrence, thanks for having us.
So really appreciate you guys coming on at such short notice. And the reason I wanted to have both of you on is both of you obviously have strong business acumen. You've been running businesses for a while, and so interested to hear how you are reacting from a business perspective, but also figured it'd be useful to get a US perspective and a Canadian perspective, and to find out exactly how this virus is kind of impacting life and business in each country. Before we get started, I do just want to provide a quick disclaimer. For those listening, please do not use this podcast for medical advice and consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. Secondly, the information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional or legal advice. I just have to tread carefully on this particular topic. So I guess just to set the scene before we get into this, guys, there's a lot of mixed reports going on. It's getting a bit confusing with the media just coming out of all sorts of different opinion pieces. One side is saying herd immunity is the way to go. Let's just get, let's not worry about social distancing. The sooner everyone gets exposed and immune to it, the sooner we'll get rid of it. However, then you've got the other side saying, hang on, we need to flatten the curve and allow the healthcare systems of the various countries to gear up and be able to take on the burden of all the infected. And therefore, we do need to have social distancing. And obviously, there's some nuance in there. But there's a lot of different opinions out there. And obviously, a lot of that is generated by the fact that maybe there's a lot of unknowns in this situation. So Luke, let's start with you. What's happening there in Minnesota? How's things going?
Well, we're kind of like in the middle, in terms of the numbers. Like, it's maybe worth saying, what date we're recording this, Lawrence. I'm not sure when you're going to launch this, but today is
15th,
March 15th. Yeah. And I was listening to a podcast, Tim Ferriss's podcast, around coronavirus yesterday. Yesterday was the 14th. Well, a Saturday. Well, we recorded that on a Monday, and I feel like, my goodness, as fast as everything is moving, so much of that information is outdated. Now, his podcast topic was how to cope with what's going on, not the breaking news on what's going on. So right now, at the time of this podcast, we are kind of in the middle of the 50 states in the U.S. in terms of the number of coronavirus cases. We don't have a death in Minnesota, but we're kind of in the middle in terms of number of cases. New York, Washington, California being the states that have the most cases overall. But I will say that just a couple hours ago, the governor shut down schools till the end of the month. So that's the big happening today, as the schools have been closed down. When that happens, that means people have to avoid going to work, to stay home to take care of their kids. The impact of that is, it's something, I don't know what the percentage is, 62% of nurses have children at home. And so that means, do we have healthcare workers at home and take care of their kid? Like with so many of these issues, it's a whole cascade of other issues that are created with this. But that's kind of where we are right now in this state. And I guess we'll get into what Discover Strength's doing as the podcast progresses here.
Yeah, appreciate that. And Mike, what's happening in Ontario? What's the situation there?
It's very interesting times here. Just by watching the American CNN, that's where we get most of their news from. I think we're maybe a little bit ahead of them. Even by the start of the week, a lot of things were rolling in. The big one is pretty much all of the schools, and that's at the elementary and high school level. They're going to be shut down for the next 3 weeks. Next week was already March break, so the kids would have got that week off anyways. But like I said, 3 weeks off. I believe all the universities at the end of last week have now canceled. There's even discussions that the kids may not have to do their finals. Today was actually probably the biggest day. Again, it's Sunday, the 15th, and all of Toronto, all of that, which is obviously our biggest city in Canada, anything to do with government control has basically been shut down. And I actually had to text Blair, who has his gym in Toronto, because we heard all fitness centers have been shut down. But that's all fitness centers that get any sort of government funding, which includes our YMCAs, which are obviously quite large. So we're seeing a cascade almost on an hour-to-hour basis of things shutting down. And then our prime minister, he came on the air this morning, and obviously they're talking to him a lot because he's the leader of our country. But his wife was one of the first ones who was infected. She had been overseas, and both him and her are in self-quarantine. And the big headline we woke up this morning is nothing is off the table. And the two big ones that they're talking about is shutting down our border completely, and then the possibility of a mandatory 14-day shutdown for everything that's not essential.
Okay, let's park on the shutdown. I'm interested, obviously, in addressing that. So, one of the things I was thinking there, Luke, you were talking about how content has been produced recently by Tim Ferriss is out of date. It's kind of ironic because, I want to dive into how you are responding in terms of how Discover Strength are responding to this, which may be out of date when this is published. Because if obviously there is a shutdown, then there's little that we can do. But I still think it's important to cover it in any case. So can you go through what you're doing as a business in response to this to try and mitigate the impact?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to give advice, and not advice. I'm going to try to make statements that are not completely contingent on where we are in our understanding and the developments, but more look through the lens of like how we are contingency planning. So the first thing I'm sharing with our leaders is the Stockdale Paradox. And maybe you've heard of the Stockdale Paradox. It was made popular by Jim Collins, where he talks about James Stockdale, who is a high-ranking, I think it's a Navy officer, and he's captured in Vietnam, and he's tortured, and he's a prisoner of war for like 7 years. And he's asked the question, well, you survived this. What were the common factors of the people that survived and the people that perished? And he said, well, the people that perished, that was easy. They were the optimists. They said, hey, we're going to be out by Christmas. And then when Christmas rolled around and they weren't out, they just lost all faith, and their spirits crumbled, and eventually they didn't survive. And so the Stockdale Paradox, in a nutshell, is just two components: face the brutal facts, and then foster hope and optimism. So you have to face the brutal facts while you're being optimistic. And so all of the conversations we're having internally is we have to face the brutal facts, and we have to prepare for a new set of brutal facts and prepare for whatever that reality could be and face up to it. And while we do that, still have this constant fostering of hope and optimism. It can't be one or the other. It can't be hope and optimism while burying your head in the sand. And it can't be just complete panic and you've lost all hope. So I think that frames up, for us, that frames up how we move forward, face the brutal facts, and then foster hope and optimism. And then I'll give you a brief summary of kind of like what we're doing is we're looking at all the different possible scenarios and then trying to come up with the contingency plan for each scenario. So let's say, I'll just give a couple examples. Let's say we lose between 1 and 25 of our clients. What are all the different things we would do if we lost those clients? What if we lose between 26 and 125 of our clients? What would we do if we lost, I'm making these up, 226 to 500 of our clients? What would we do if there's a mandate for all restaurants, bars, and gyms to close? Because some would suggest that might be on the horizon. What if there's a mandated quarantine where people have to stay home? What if one of our trainers gets sick and has, or is this, quarantine? Then what do we do if COVID-19 incidence declines, or a vaccine's developed, or the virus is under control? So what does return to normalcy look like? So I think the starting point is you got to look at all the different things that could happen in your business and what could happen externally, and then come up with your 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things you're going to do. So maybe right now, if you've only lost a couple clients, you say, all right, here's what we can do. We can continue to do in-facility messaging around our cleaning procedures, our hand washing. We can do social media messaging around our cleaning procedures. We can do social media messaging around, hey, now more than ever, you should probably be taking care of your health. And I don't know if you can improve immunity, but you can foster immunity by really smart exercise. Social media messaging around, and I think Owen is the one that's done this the best, is, hey, this is not a gym. I mean, here's a picture of a gym, and there's like 50 dudes in it in close proximity, and then his studio, and it's like a one-on-one scenario. And maybe right now is an opportunity. You could say someone could grow their business right now because people are going to leave massive gyms and need a place to exercise. I don't know if that's the case. That's an optimistic way of looking at it. So those are some of the things we might do in the short term if we lose just a number of clients. And then we should be prepared. What if we lose 50% of our revenue? What if we lose 50% of our clientele? I don't want to deal with that scenario when it happens. I want to have a plan right now. What if we lose 50% of our revenue for 6 months? What would we do? So those are the kind of things, the questions I think you have to ask, and you have to start getting those brainstorms down on paper now so that when each one of these kind of triggering levels is reached, you're ready to go, with the optimism that hopefully we don't get to any of those levels. So with that, I'll stop talking, and Mike you can let Mike take over.
Just before that, no, that's really smart, and I think that's really valuable for people to go through the exercise in their businesses. Luke, would you be comfortable in elaborating on any one of those scenarios, what you would do, just so that people have an example of how you address that question? Is that okay?
Sure. So some of these things we have not completely worked through as a team yet, but it's on our list. We're like adding to a Google Doc of what these options will be, and we'll start meeting on it tomorrow. But let's go like extreme. Let's say we lose 50% of what we call our active clients. So everyone's on a membership. So here's a few of the things we would do. We would reduce all of the salaries that we pay to everyone that's on a salary. So none of our trainers are on salaries, but everybody else is. And we might reduce that salary up to 50% with a promise that we true up at the end of the year or in early 2021 and repay all that compensation. We might ask our clients to stay on auto pay, okay, even though they're not coming in, and we just reduce the amount of that auto pay and say we're going to need revenue to keep paying our trainers and to stay alive as a business. So we're going to just reduce your auto pay, and I'm making the percentages up here, to 60 or 70% of what you normally would pay. You're going to keep on paying, and then we will give you the promise that when you return to training, you'll get all those sessions that we always say have rolled over, and then we're going to keep you on that same pricing for the same number of months that you were on this kind of contingency pricing. All right. So that's something we would do at like the pretty extreme. We're losing 50% of our clientele. That bullet that I just shared with you, we would apply to if restaurants and bars and gyms were ordered to close. If there was a mandated quarantine, we would include those. And then a step up from that, let's say we start losing 10% of our active clients. Okay. So 10% of our active clients, it's not that 10% of our active clients kills us as a business. But frankly, that's like, whoa, this is a leading indicator that more bad stuff might happen. So we have to start, we can't wait until we're at 50% of our, clients are gone. We have to take action at 10%. And so we're going to reduce salaries by maybe 25% with the promise of the true up later. All of our trainers are paid a percentage of the session. Maybe we drop that percentage by 2 to 3% with the promise of the true up later. Again, we ask our clients maybe at that threshold to stay on auto pay, but it's a very reduced auto pay. The one thing we're developing tomorrow is 3 other training options. So one training option is that we will create videos for home workouts.
Right.
That someone gets 2 different home workouts per week, and there's a subscription to that. The second option is that we will Skype train you, literally like with your phone or your tablet, where we're literally taking you through a workout virtually. And number 3 is we're thinking about having trainers go to people's home and train them in home if they're comfortable with that. So those are just 3 options that we're considering to keep people training and frankly, keep a revenue stream. And obviously those are 3 very different revenue levels, but just different options to keep a trainer engaged, keep a client engaged beyond literally asking the kind of more desperate route, which is, hey, please keep paying and you're not going to get anything, but we need your revenue. And then we're going to make it up to you later.
Thank you so much for that. Those are some great ideas. Mike, I know that can sometimes be a tough act to follow, but I'm sure you've got some good ideas. So how have you been responding to this as a business?
Well, the first thing we've been doing, much like Luke and his staff, is on an hour-by-hour basis, we are looking at what are the actual stats, what are not just what we're hearing in the media, but when the CDC comes out and they give their guidelines, what are they making not mandatory, but saying that, hey, these are the things you really have to do. So just like Luke said, I think Owen did a great job and, showing that, hey, we're not necessarily the big box gym with 1 million people coming and going. I would make the argument that I think a lot of the gyms on our side of the equation, the smaller boutique style gyms, one-on-one or small group training, we've been doing a pretty good job of keeping things clean. I know even before all this started at STG, we had worked with a local Canadian company to develop a product that not only just, disinfects, but is also easy on the equipment. It doesn't have any sort of crazy chemical smells or odors. We used to just use peroxide, but it was very hard on the pads. And pretty much every time someone was done a set, we got bottles all over the gym and we're constantly spraying them down. Now, just the small things like making sure that they're washing their hands every time they come in. Us as trainers are washing our hands between every client. Now, we never took it that far, but we were always on top of this. At the end of every night, even long before this, every single machine gets completely disinfected. So we have over 100 in our facility. So it takes a little bit of time, but that was just our standard practice anyways. Now we're just doing it like we're on steroids. As soon as someone gets off the machine, we're just hitting it. We use an app to talk with everyone throughout the organization, because we have trainers in the morning who don't necessarily see trainers in the evening. And we've also put out there at the beginning of last week saying, we're probably going to see a bit of a downturn. We would have seen it on March break anyways, but we didn't know what the severity was going to be. I know you don't want to get to the mandatory shutdown, but I think in our country it's going to happen. And the interesting thing is, I think it's going to be a wash in our country, because if everyone has to shut down, then there really isn't competition for business. And even at the beginning of last week, the government had put out that they're going to have a $1 billion fund to help businesses get through. And just today, they've already increased that to $10 billion. Now, what that's going to look like, we don't know. It might just go to big business. It might help small business. We're not exactly sure. We've been kind of looking at 2 schools of thought for this. The one being very much what I think we've all done so far, that being, guys like myself and Luke and his staff and Owen, and I seen Blair posted something, that making that, I don't want to say marketing pitch because it sounds like we're shallow, but I guess that's what it is, that if you come into our facility, it's much cleaner. it's much better thought out. Not only is the workout safe, but now from a microbiology standpoint, it's much safer. But I've also been playing with the idea and also sending this to my team here that maybe we should shut down ahead of time before it becomes mandatory, and just understand that we're going to take a bit of a hit. But if we get shut down 2 days before a mandatory shutdown anyways, it might just show that we were on top of things and that we were caring. And obviously that's not a great business move, but you look at on the bigger scale with all these different politicians in these different countries, it seems to me that the ones that were ahead of the curve are going to be looked at more favorably than the ones who are behind it. So we haven't made the call yet that we are just going to shut down ahead of time. But I've also thought maybe the high intensity community should rally around that idea that, hey, we're just going to say, we're ahead of things in terms of biomechanics. We're ahead of things in terms of exercise science. And I truly believe that maybe we should all collectively be ahead of things in terms of this shutdown. And I can make an argument against that I think that maybe we've lost our sanity a little bit here. Certainly taking precautions only makes sense. But when you look at the numbers compared to, heart disease, cigarette smoking, unintentional injuries in car accidents, we still pale in comparison to the changes we could make to help everybody out. So we're flip-flopping back and forth on what we are trying to do forging forward, if that makes sense.
That's very, very brave of you to say that. And so if I understand that rightly, you would be shutting down early. I know this is just a hypothetical scenario, just to win the respect of people, but also to do quote unquote the right thing.
Yes, you could look at it as the right thing, but you could also look at it, we're talking just business, on playing the long game, because it is my belief that we're going to return back to normal. I think it's going to be relatively quick. I'd be very, very surprised to see if 2 months out we're still dealing with all of this. We're going to find out, soon enough. But I think that in the eyes of public opinion, if even a couple weeks from now you can come out and truly say, and everything's documented with social media now, that we were really ahead of the curve and we were really putting our clients' health first. I think that may be a very positive thing, both for the health of the clients and from a business perspective. We're not, again, this is Sunday. We'll see what happens Monday and Tuesday. I'm ready to say that. But I could see that being a very positive thing.
Yeah. Luke, from your perspective, someone who's got probably a lot more overhead than many in the HIIT industry, what do you make of that? Do you agree with that, or how do you view that idea?
So my mindset with all of this is that I don't want to for 1 second pretend that I can prognosticate or that I'm an expert on what is going to happen and where this is going. So, and as you both know, you could read something that says we will be dealing with this 8 months from now, and you can deal with something that says this is going to start to get a lot better in 2 to 4 weeks. And so I don't want to even have an opinion on where that's going to go. And so along with that, I don't want to have an opinion on, are we supposed to shut down or are we not supposed to shut down? So like I just read and posted the article from Time Magazine with some, quote unquote experts in it saying that being in a gym is not dangerous right now. Okay. All right. So I just listened to a physician and a podcast locally here yesterday morning say that you can still go to restaurants, and he's going to go to a restaurant tonight, he said, where I have a friend that just messaged me who's in Chicago that said they're about to shut down all restaurants and bars, and it's imminent. And so I'm not going to, I love the idea that if it's the right thing to do it. I just don't know if it's the right thing to do. And it's not from a business standpoint. It's just, I don't actually know if it's like, I know buying toilet paper is not the right thing to do, but everyone's buying toilet paper. And so
why is everyone buying toilet paper? I don't even understand this.
Whoever came up with that marketing idea, we all need to hire him or her because they are a genius.
But this is how the human psychology is right now. Like I had an employee whose mother, was texting that employee and said, hey, are you guys stocking up on supplies? Are you stocking up on toilet paper? And I told the employee, I said, hey, if things get bad, like really bad for Discover Strength and the coronavirus, no one's come to Discover Strength. So we need less toilet paper than ever. So like, we don't need to stock up on toilet paper. We should be selling our toilet paper at a profit. But right away, smart people are becoming incredibly illogical with all of this. And I'm not saying everyone's becoming illogical, but we're just doing things that are so fear-based. And actually, one person that I've loved to follow, this is kind of a non sequitur, is actually Stu Phillips. He is posting so much on this, and my goodness, he's taking it seriously. And I love reading what he posts because I feel like he's filtering through some of the stuff that's out there. Because, at any given time, we could all go read 600 different articles and listen to 200 different podcasts. And you don't know when to stop. You don't know what source you want to seek out. You find yourself seeking out sources that support the narrative that you're rooting for.
Right.
So I love what Michael said, and maybe the best example of that in the U.S. is, one of my favorite business people in the world is Danny Meyer, who's the famous restaurateur in New York. He proactively closed down all of his restaurants in New York 2 days ago. Now, New York's in a different situation than most of our country is, but he did that because he said this is just the right thing to do in New York right now. And so he is doing what Mike said. I would just need complete clarity that it is the right thing for us to do. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to, keep revenue as high as possible for as long as possible. If I knew that it was the right thing to do, we would do it. And that's why in our marketing messages and our communication with clients, we're not making silly promises that are going to, we're going to find out are just dead wrong 2 weeks from now. And I think, a number of people have done that, have just said the wrong thing and given the wrong advice, whether it's, Donald Trump or, we've all probably said something over the past few weeks. I remember an attendee of our conference reached out to me a number of weeks ago and said, what are you going to do with this coronavirus thing in your conference? I said, are you kidding me? We're having a conference. Like, this is a non-issue. And that was captured because I text messaged it to him. Like, I was dead wrong. And so I learned pretty quickly that I have to stop making any type of predictions, and we have to listen to, I guess, the authorities and make sure that we're following their counsel. And in the meantime, like I said, we are being proactive with contingency plans.
Yeah. I want to just touch on what you guys have kind of alluded to at times during this, which is the potential benefits this might have. Obviously, this is all a bit moot if everyone gets shut down, but maybe it's not. Maybe after all this is said and done, maybe this virus is around for a year or two. I don't know. There's a new appreciation for the boutique gym industry. More privacy, less frequency if it's in a hit context, greater immunity, less exposure to lots of people and germs and what have you. So do you think that this could have a beneficial impact on the kind of boutique studio sector in the long term? And I'll put that to Mike first, and then Luke, if you want to follow up.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about that with our trainers at the gym, and it's going to be very interesting. I've told everyone, I think next couple of weeks it's going to get, regardless of how it plays out, at least with the media, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But when it is all said and done, and it will be, it's not going to go on forever. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at many different things in their lives differently. Like I'm from several things in the old school model where I shake hands with the vast majority of people that come into my life, and it's a respect thing, and that's what I was taught. Is that going to go away? Are we going to look 10, 15 years from now and saying that shaking hands, like, I can't believe people did that? And I hope that's not the case, but hey, we'll see. So it's going to be a whole new world coming out of that, because even if it comes out that we flatten this curve and the cases go down and we look at the overall fatality number and it ends up being quite low, especially compared to some of the other epidemics and pandemics that we've had, just because it's now going to be so ingrained into everyone's psyche that this happened and it could possibly happen again. I think we're going to see a lot of things start to change in all business, not just ours on the gym side. And it's going to open up an opportunity, just like you alluded to, Lawrence, that we've already been marketing on the idea that we're very safe, we're evidence-based, we can get results in a very efficient amount of time. And I think previous to this, I haven't seen anyone in our side of the industry, even though we were already doing it, saying that, hey, we're far more cleanly than these other gyms. We take this very seriously. Just like in Owen's picture, the idea of transmission of any kind of germs, even just normal influenza, is going to be far less. I read a paper just 2 nights ago, and they were talking about some of the places in the gyms where you have a higher percentage of picking up anything. And the worst one was the dumbbell rack. Everyone's grabbing all the dumbbells nonstop, and people might wipe machines down at a commercial gym, but how many times have you seen people wipe down the dumbbell handles? And, most of the gyms that are on our side of the coin, they don't have dumbbells in a rack between 100 and 150 pounds. A lot of them don't use free weights, and the ones that do, kind of like mine and Luke's place, we use the power blocks. Well, it's very easy to clean them. There's only one set of handles, and you can do it routinely. So it's absolutely going to open up a big potential for growth after the fact. So again, it's just like Luke said, it's tough to predict these things. But at the same time, you look at the stock market, a lot of people are going to make a lot of money predicting on what's going to come up strong next. And my opinion is going to be that maybe give it a little bit of time so you're not preying on people's insecurities, but at the same time, letting people know that, hey, this has always been our business model. We've always been here. It's always a safer spot in terms of cleanliness and germs and such like that we're going to have a big opportunity to market to a bigger crowd. And it's going to be interesting. Everything is going to change in some regard or another, and it's going to be interesting. And those who can get ahead of it are going to do better. And I think everyone's going to have to adapt.
Yeah, Luke, sorry, I'm really interested in your view on this, but I just wanted to say, Mike, you and I were talking offline earlier, just about how strange it is to have an event like this during a time where the media is, the way it is, the social media is everywhere. And so there's this enormous amount of recency bias. Like, this is not going to be, well, I don't know, actually. I mean, you made the point that media has a short shelf life. So maybe this will be forgotten after a few weeks or months, I don't know, and something else will take its place. But it's very, as just we all sit here and try and predict what will happen. But Luke, what's your take on this?
Well, I'm going to echo some of what Mike said. I think this is going to change how we do things from a business standpoint. I think sociologically things are going to change. I think for the three of us, I think we can now say, when this is all said and done, that we've lived through, and I don't know to the same extent that you guys feel this way for the first event, but because it's not as worldwide, but I'll be able to say that I lived through 9/11 and that I lived through coronavirus. And those are two things that just changed. I look at my employees now when I get on a plane with them and I say, hey, before 9/11, when I was your age, I could go to the gate and greet a friend when they flew home, and I could just go to the gate and just greet them there and give them a hug. And they don't even believe that, because flying was just a totally different experience. It was just totally different. And I think this is going to have that same type of impact, probably a more robust impact than that. And I can't even pretend to predict the industries that are going to emerge out of this, but they will be industries, there'll be entrepreneurs that emerge and make money out of our new way of living and doing business and thinking. And frankly, I never live this way. I never think this way, but I kind of wish we could fast forward through this right now to get to that point. And one of my pet peeves in life, just an absolute turnoff, is when someone on a Wednesday says, man, just 2 more days till Friday. And I think, well, if you think that way, you're like wishing your whole life away. You're going to want those days back when you're on your deathbed. And right now, I wouldn't mind fast forwarding through some of this. Like, I've told a few close friends and some of our team that, I would love to just wake up in October right now and be through the worst of this. And that's making an assumption that this is the worst part of this.
Yeah. Do you also think though, Luke, is I've heard some people talk about how this is like a test, that it's been a while perhaps till some of us comfy Westerners really had a test to really kind of show our true colors and really kind of see what we're made of. And maybe we'll all come, well, I know clearly a lot of people will pass away, and that's very sad, but we will kind of come through it as a society a slightly stronger than before. I know that's a very optimistic viewpoint. But I feel like that's from my perspective, a productive way of looking at it is, okay, I'm going to be my best version of myself. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to try and be as helpful as possible. And, when I watched a London Real video by Brian Rose, which I embedded on the blog post I did about this. And I just thought, I need to be doing something here to see how I can help, the listeners, the members in the membership. So I just put together a quick and dirty blog post. It's no better than any of the posts you guys have put on your own Facebook pages for your clients. But I'm just trying to collate information that might be helpful. And I feel like if this test, quote unquote test, can kind of get everyone thinking in that way and taking ownership, that we'll get a much better result at the end of all this. Mike, what's your take on that? Do you feel a similar way, or am I bonkers?
You're not bonkers, at least not for this anyways. But I think one of the reasons why a lot of us, and I don't like to necessarily speak for all the gym owners and the high intensity side of things, but I've always said I think we're more similar than we are apart. I think one of the things we all believe in is the health benefit of what we're doing. And it's great that we can make a good living. And we certainly always look at the business side of things too, because if you can't keep the lights on, then you can't help anybody. But I think on a day-to-day basis, we are constantly trying to get the best out of all the people that are around us. And if we're trying to get the best out of all the people that are around us, I think that means we're getting the best out of ourselves. So we're already in a very unique position where I think we can be leaders in our communities in promoting health. And when it comes to this coronavirus, the way we've been approaching our clients is that if any of them have any sort of concerns, or they want to take a couple weeks off, we've been very supportive of it because they are going to have their own concerns and their own mentalities. But at the same time, having that strong, united front that, when you want to come back, we're going to train, we're going to get stronger, this will pass. And I think a lot of people kind of find the strength in themselves through physical application, whether it be personal training, weight training, different sports. And obviously we see what's happening with sports with all their shutdowns. So I think we're already in a very great industry for helping people find that best in themselves. And when this is all said and done, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that several of the clients at STG did great things to help themselves and to help their neighbors and to help people in their lives. So again, I think we're already on that track. And I do have a faith in humanity that more people than not are going to make the right decisions. We hear about people hoarding toilet paper and groceries and stuff like that. But I think the vast majority of people are very reasonable, and the news just likes to sensationalize things. So it's my belief that we will come out of this much stronger as a whole. And if you want to look at it as a test, that's fine. But I don't think it's going to be too bad, realistically. I think in a couple months from now, we might be all sitting down talking again, saying, well, that was interesting. And it certainly changed some things, but I think we'll progress just fine.
Luke, you're normally one for, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're normally one for like a good general pattern quote or some kind of, you love inspirational quotes like me. So have you thought about this as like, being a business leader, you thought, not that you're embracing it. I mean, you said that you'd quite happily hit the fast forward button, but I also wonder if there's part of you that's like, this is a challenge that I have to face and I have to get through, and this is going to make our organization stronger. It's going to make me a better business leader, et cetera, et cetera. Have you thought about it in that way?
100%. So would we rather not deal with it? Yes. But I told our team right away, I said, and I've said this to them different times in different ways, that we only talk about Winston Churchill because Nazi Germany existed. In this country, we talk about Abe Lincoln because of Civil War. We don't have an opportunity to really emerge as a really great leader unless we have to go through a tumultuous situation. And so we shouldn't ask to have a journey that is lacking challenge and lacking struggle. We have to, as the struggle and the challenge emerges, we have to have the willingness and the preparedness to lean into it, like the leaders that have gone before us, that we've learned from, that we draw inspiration from, and this is our opportunity. And we have to be respectful to the people that are suffering. And I'm not saying, wow, this is a great opportunity in that sense. I'm saying, as a leader, as a business owner, it's our opportunity to define ourselves as a leader in this struggle, in this strife, in this tumult. And so that's 100% our mindset is, it's the Bruce Lee quote, don't ask for an easier life, ask for more strength or more skills. And that's where our heads are at right now, is that we very rarely, I told all of our leaders and managers, in your whole life, in your whole career, you will probably only be faced with one situation of this magnitude. So let's make sure that, when the story is told about how you handled it, the right story is being told.
Yeah, thanks for that, Luke. That was awesome. So I'd like to really end on talking about the absolute worst case scenario, and the way you guys think about it and what you'd be doing. I mean, let's just play it out, right? So there's a complete lockdown, a complete shutdown of personal training facilities for the foreseeable. I mean, you said there was potentially a 14-day shutdown there, Mike, but let's say that's extended. How would you address that situation? How would you spend your time?
You want me to take that first?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Mike. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the old things that my dad taught me, and he's been in business since 1979, I get a lot from him, is I have always believed in having 3 months reserve fund that would basically cover 100% of your overhead ready to go. So essentially, if STG did not bring in $1 for 3 months, all of the overhead that we carry is already locked down, ready to go. Obviously we don't want that to happen, but if that were be the case for the next, 90 days, we don't really have any sort of issues. Past that, things get a little bit dicier, but that's one of the main things that even when I was a much smaller business with a lot fewer people than we are now, I always had that 3 months. So I can't stress that enough. If, say, for instance, we were on a mandatory shutdown past the 14 days. Again, every country is going to be different, but a lot of it is actually, in my opinion, going to come down to the government. And, if all of a sudden the government came out and said, well, you don't have property taxes because you and everybody else can't do business, well, then it extends the amount of time that we can do things. For the employees of our country who won't be able to work during a shutdown, we have a program called EI, and it normally takes a little bit of monkeying around to get it. The government's already put in a place, you can get EI almost instantly right now. Like I said, just less than 7 days ago, they committed $1 billion to business. Now they come out this morning and they say 10 billion. So a lot of our overhead, at least in Canada, is pretty much fixed going to the government in one form of tax or fee or another. So if all of a sudden they stepped in, they say all businesses are going to get a holiday or some sort of break, that's going to be substantial because, all of our clients, they're all in the same boat as us. And I talked to a bunch of my clients last week. We didn't have too many cancellations based on this. And several of them are very heavily into the stock market. And for those who are following the stock market the week before this podcast, it had a terrible week. The worst week ever. And they lost a substantial amount of money. And hopefully they have the ability to hold out. I think the market's going to come back around. But, they might be looking at the next couple months and say, hey, I can't afford certain things in my life. And, training may be one of the things, and I think it's one of the most important things they can do, but they may or may not see it that way. And, certain things for their kids that I know a lot of my clients, they have kids that are in high level athletics. It's very expensive to do that here. So all of a sudden, those kids aren't going to be in those programs. And then we see training from those programs to the kids that are trying to advance. So it's going to be a very interesting time. But the best advice I could give to sum it all up is you got to have that overhead under control, because if you are paying giant amounts of rent and all your equipment's on lease and you've based your model on best case scenario numbers, it's going to be really, really tough. So, that saying that, hope for the best, but plan for the worst is something that we've always done here at STG, and just making sure that you can keep that overhead in check. So if you have a couple of lean weeks or a couple of lean months, or in the case of us, possibly a complete shutdown for a bit, you can withstand it. And then those who make it on the other side, I think, are going to be a lot stronger for it. And like Luke just spoke about, when it comes to leadership, those who can get through the tough times, I think are going to probably see an expansion on the other side of things.
Yeah, I'm really impressed that you've got the 3 months in reserves. I think that is best practice across personal and business finance. I know that's not useful to those that don't have that. We might be too late. But it's certainly something that, once we're through this, it's certainly something to work towards in your business, to save that, to create that cash reserve for when this happens, or an event happens that has the same impact again in the future like this. Luke, have you got a similar thing with Discover Strength? I mean, if you don't mind talking about those sorts of details, do you have reserves that you could rely on?
Well, I congratulate Mike for having that. Really smart. I don't want to say too much as far as that goes, but I'll say that whether you do or whether you don't, you can't do anything about it now, right? Like you said, Lawrence. And so I would like to give some advice, or not advice. I would just make comment if someone doesn't have that, which frankly, I don't know many small to medium-sized businesses that do. And I think so, like, even if an owner happens to, which I don't think many do, I know that their employees don't. And so let's just say that someone doesn't have that. And I congratulate Mike. I think he's brilliant for having that. And beyond brilliant, I would say disciplined, is that you have to, first of all, understand that you're not the only one going through this. Everyone is literally going through this. And so I think we're going to get a little bit of leniency from things like landlords and the other responsibilities that you have. I think we're going to get leniency in some of those areas. Now, we shouldn't rely on that, but I think we are going to see those leniencies because literally everybody is in the same boat. And then I think our mindset, in addition to all the things that I already said, and how we cut our spending based on staff, on overhead, how we try to maximize the revenue while we can. I think our mindset needs to shift to what's the recovery going to be like. And so let's say this is really bad for 4 weeks. Let's say it's bad for 4 months. What's the recovery look like? Because you're going to have clients that are away from the studio. And if they really only need to be away, I'm making all these time frames up, but if they only need to be away for 6 weeks, and due to inertia and other fear factors, they're away for 10 weeks, that's going to crush you. And so you want to make sure that we are marketing in a way that we're getting people back in the door, and that we have recovery programs to get people back in the door, so that we minimize this drop in revenue to the shortest time period that we possibly can. So that's where I would, if I were listening to this podcast, that's where my mindset would be, is, minimize the drop in revenue up front, control my expenses as much as possible, but then be ready to be proactive and get people back in the door as the recovery starts, because things are going to be back to normal, and the consumer is not going to be back to normal in terms of their spending out of, fear. And I start to think about the podcast you did, Lawrence, a number of weeks ago with Dave Smith. And I mean, this is maybe a number of months ago now. And he talks about around 9/11 in the US, how people stopped flying and they started driving more. And the number of auto accidents that were fatal, increased dramatically because people didn't want to fly and they perceived that driving was safer. And all the statistics, of course, would suggest that flying is far safer. But we don't necessarily do logical things, and the consumer doesn't spend money in logical ways. And so we have to control that narrative or try to shape that narrative when people do return in full force, or the climate allows us to return in full force. Let's make sure we're marketing and messaging in a way that people are back at it.
Yeah, I had not thought about the kind of the long-term implications of that fear. And obviously you gave the example there of 9/11, and that could be obviously quite negative, have a negative impact. Luke, we've spoken before about clarity breaks, working on the business. I was thinking about, I guess in preparation for this, I was thinking about, worst case scenario, if we are churning sessions, churning clients, and there is downtime, what's the best use of that time? And, I always hear people say, I know I should be working on the business, but I'm so busy training people, I don't have time. And maybe this is a good time to reflect and sit down and actually think about redesigning the business that you want, maybe reevaluating your goals, maybe reading traction and start implementing that, maybe actually give you a break to get ready for when things do return to normal. Is that? Would you agree with that as a process you might go through if that was the case?
Yeah. So not only is that like the smart thing to do for your business, but my goodness, that's I think like the most therapeutic thing to do. Like you can't sit down and self-quarantine and watch Netflix all day and still feel good that you're being proactive. Like I think you have to, number one, take care of yourself. You have to protect your own confidence. And then you have to be proactive. So let me give you a quick example, Lawrence. Like it's Sunday right now when we're recording this. I worked with a shift of clients this morning. I trained 6 clients like I do every Sunday. Well, I was supposed to be on an airplane this morning to San Diego for board meetings for the International Health Racket Sports Club Association. So I'm on the board there, and I was supposed to have board meetings tonight, Monday, Tuesday. Conference starts Wednesday. I was going to speak at the conference Wednesday. Thursday's conference, Friday's conference. I was going to get inducted on the board on Friday and fly home Saturday. Conference on Saturday, fly home. Well, then the next week I had 2 flights to give 2 talks, one in Florida, one on the East Coast. And then it was a rec conference. People would start flying in on Thursday. I was going to rec conference, all the way through Saturday night. Sunday morning, James Fisher and I were going to fly to Portland to go visit Diana Del Garbino for 2 days. And so that was what my next really 16 days looked like. Well, all of that is canceled now. And so my assistant, Heather, just looked at me and it's like, you have the most open calendar you've ever had ever. And so my mindset is, how can I take this time and be as proactive as possible so that I am 100% attacking coronavirus and attacking, doing everything we can do, controlling the controllables so that we're ready for this. So as much as I'm distraught about the situation, the virus, and then on a selfish note, we all have these selfish notes, I'm bummed out on missing out on some of the stuff that I was really looking forward to the next 2 weeks. I have an opportunity to really dig in and work on the business and make sure we're prepared for this. So that's my mindset is, starting tomorrow is that's how I'm going to spend the next 16, 17 days.
Yeah, that's great. Mike, any final thoughts on how you would spend that time in that event, and I guess advice for others listening?
I was once taught this really great saying from a martial artist named Grandmaster Daniel Verkerk. And he said, it's very simple, but it's very wise. Anything can work for you or against you. And it seems very simple, but the deeper you dive into it, the greater it can affect everything in your life. And with these new challenges that we have, it's really easy to look at the ways it can work against you, but you look at the ways it can work for you. A lot of the, say, process, I'll go to your book Traction, which I read because of your podcast, Lawrence, I enjoyed it. You look at a lot of the processes. So if you want to really shore them up, you can do that on your cell phone. talking to people. You don't necessarily have to have everyone in the same room. You could do that. You just had a gentleman on your podcast. He was talking about website design, and I got some insight from that. And I could sit on my computer and look on my website, and I don't spend as much time on as I could. But say I got 14 days off. 14 days, I could revamp the entire website if I felt so inclined to. But I might look at some things where I feel it's lacking, and then try to make it a little bit better. But when it's going to be just a bit off topic, but when we were going through this, a thought came to mind. And this might be good for our business and training people moving forward. If you think of a lot of the research that we read, a lot of it is about how to make the best progress in the gym, whether that be strength or muscular hypertrophy. What if all of a sudden people start coming into the gym because they start looking for the idea of being more resistant to virus and disease? Now, we already know that's the case of strength training, but it's not the most looked at form of what we're trying to achieve from strength training. What if all of a sudden our friends James Fisher and James Steele start looking at, okay, well, instead of what exercise makes our biceps the biggest or what exercise makes us run the fastest, what methodology of exercise makes us the most resistant to different strains of bacteria and flu-like symptoms? I'm not even sure how you would design something like that, but I could see even the literature moving into a different direction here. And then all of a sudden, instead of marketing to people, hey, we make you stronger in terms of physical strength, well, we make you stronger in terms of your immune system. We already know that's the case, but to what degree it does, I could see a whole other branch of research coming out that way. So again, anything can work for you or against you. I see a limitless amount of possibilities to come out of this situation to make us all better at what we do.
Yeah, well said. And gents, I could talk about this for quite easily for another hour with both of you, because there's just so much, and you both have so much wisdom and great ideas. And I really appreciate you both taking the time and both being so well prepared. I think this is going to be so helpful. I'm actually going to try and get this live first thing tomorrow morning. I'm just going to probably put it out relatively raw, just so that people have it. Because as we know, everything is changing by the day. Best way.
Lawrence?
Sorry, Luke. Yeah,
can you maybe consider making a promise to at least me and to Michael that when we're through all this, whatever we define through as 1 month, 6 months, whatever it is, we do a little celebration podcast, and you can have a beer while you're recording it. I'll have a Diet Coke. Michael will have whatever he wants to drink, and we'll just talk about better days.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Do you not drink, Luke? I've always seen you with Diet Coke.
I don't.
At the events.
I don't.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. Is that a lifelong thing, or is that you just?
Yeah, I've never had a drink in my life.
Wow. Well, that's one for another time.
Well, that's the secret. I've never been drunk. I've probably had 5 or 6, not even full drinks, just tasting it when I was a teenager. I didn't much care for the taste of any of it, and you waste so much time, energy, and money on alcohol, which, by the way, is
absolutely
one of the much larger fatality points compared to this coronavirus that I did have written down. Maybe a goal for the future there, Lawrence.
What a note to end on. Yeah, no, I will say in my defense, I hardly drink these days. My consumption is very much. I actually didn't drink for a year. I didn't drink during Ashling's pregnancy, and for some time afterwards. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's not even a big part of my life anymore. But no, I remember, Mike, obviously at Rec 2019, I remember being up, I think 3 a.m. with you in Denny's, and I just looked at you and I couldn't believe you were still awake. I was like, because I was so curious. I was like, how are you still breathing? Like, how are you still awake at this time? And you've not even had a drink? I was quite impressed. Gents, thanks again for joining me. Luke, do you want to what's the best way for people to reach you?
They can always go to discoverstrength.com or shoot me an email at luke@discoverstrength.com.
Cool. And Mike, yourself?
stgstrengthandpower.com, or we're pretty big on social media, Facebook, Instagram, just STG Strength and Power. It will all come directly to me.
Great stuff. All right. And for everyone listening, to find the blog post for this episode, please go to highintensitybusiness.com and just search coronavirus, because this won't have an episode number. So just search coronavirus in the search bar. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.
Discover how to achieve your health and fitness goals, become a great personal trainer, and build a successful, high-intensity training business. Check out highintensitybusiness.com. highintensitybusiness.com.